Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, it is I am the one and only Tiana here, and I am back for the likes of the Mexi Toys videos. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for some more of Let's Play of another Super Mario 3D, a ROM hack of Super Mario 64 DS for the Nintendo DS. So, last time, we somehow collected about 10 Power Stars yet again, and as a matter of fact, we did somehow conclude every aspect in terms of the forms of Sunbeam Bay, and in addition to that, we also did manage to collect some more Power Stars in one of those secret courses, and in addition to that, we also did manage to be able to experience the Desert World. So logically that was about the fact that I believe, as far as I can recall, we've only got about, I would say, 32 more Power Stars to go until we basically done everything in terms of this ROM hack. So because of that, yeah, today for this video is that we are about to be heading back into the Desert World, and suffice to say, I really can't guarantee if it's possible we can able to actually complete everything in this whole entire run, because, well, as a matter of fact though, it's about the fact that eventually at some point, we can able to actually definitely try to say that we're definitely gonna able to actually unlock the fourth and the final playable character, and that's of course Wario. But thankfully though, it's not going to be too far from that though, which is especially noticeable is about the fact that after all, once we're able to actually keep on collecting some more Power Stars at some form or another, so as a result though, let's go inside the actual Yoshi Sphinx. So as a result though, it's about the fact that, as you can tell, there's a lot going on around here. Like for instance though, there's about the fact that there's a black block right there, which, usually relatively speaking, yes, as be expected, we only need Wario to do that in order to able to actually access to one of those missions, but the other two we can able to do for now. So for instance though, let's climb all the way to the top on that particular pole right there, and as a matter of fact though, we can able to actually miraculously try to make our way to the very top of Yoshi Sphinx. So, as a matter of fact though, it's about the fact that with that particular picture frame of that particular world we're entering right now, the actual picture image of Yoshi Sphinx is actually based off from Dry Ruins from Mario Kart Wii. Well, at least according to the forms of that particular visual presentation in mind. So, oh jeez, I forgot about those particular platforms. We have to go from platform to platform. But luckily, with Luigi's broken, backflip twirling ability, that way it'll make platforming a lot easier to manage. And oh, no. I don't want to get burned by the forms of that fly guy of some sort. And there's a Power Star there, but oh jeez, I've almost got full off. But thankfully though, oh, no. Oh gosh. I totally forgot about the fact that sometimes though you have to make specific angle with this part, and obviously I can't triple jump for this point, but hopefully, alright, there we go. We somehow made it at the very top right there, and suffice to say, it's about the fact that I believe we can now able to move on to the next mission. So, anyways, so yeah, a few things I want to talk about this though, and that's what appears to be for the fact that, well, today's date of course there is the 11th of July today, in some cases in 2025 today, and as you might expect, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 Plus 4 remake has been released today, for not only for PlayStation 4, but in addition to PlayStation 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X/S, PC Steam, Nintendo Switch, and finally, Nintendo Switch 2. And suffice to say though, is about the fact that still we only got the Switch 1 version for its physical department, just because, well, then again though, I'm thinking about the fact that I'm also able to ignore the Switch 2 version, physical version, because like we've already established that before, the only thing you do get inside the physical game case though, and that's what appears to be of course, the infamous download code in the actual specific plastic case or something like that. So, yeah, I felt it was a little bit of a rip-off, especially noticeable. Imagine in the near-distant future, if you're planning to sell it, well, unfortunately though, if you already redeemed the code, well, there's absolutely no point for able to try to sell it anyway, so I digress. So, and as far as I'm aware, I did manage to able to look on the actual comparison between both the Switch 1 version and the Switch 2 version of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 Plus 4, and as a result though, it's about the fact that they both look a bit identical in terms of visual fidelity. Although, mind you though, about the fact that the Switch version, or the Switch 2 version I should say, is actually a little bit more powerful in comparison to Switch 1, such as the forms of additional visual graphics wise, specifically in some stages, and on top of that, improved shadows, lighting, and of course, frame rate. And not to mention though, the quality itself too. If you're trying to play for the game on TV mode, like for instance though on the Switch 2 version, it's going to be most likely 1080p and 60 frames per second on the Switch 2 version, whilst meanwhile on the Switch 1 version, I'm pretty sure we only go for about 900p in terms of the forms of the TV you know, the quality. And in addition to that though, when it comes to frame rate though, much like the forms of how it does it on Pro Skater 1+2 Remake back in 2021, it's gonna be most likely 30 FPS, which I'm perfectly fine with it, because as far as I'm aware, it's perfectly playable in some scenarios, at least in terms of the forms of the Switch 1 and the Switch 2 versions as far as I'm aware of. So, but turns out that was about the fact that I did manage able to play through the game for myself, and I do really enjoy it so far. Although mind you that was about the fact that there might be some questionable changes in regards to the forms of Pro Skater 4 portion of the game, just because no matter what that was about the fact that we're going on to the forms of the classic traditional style, rather than the forms of trying to explore around in the actual open world vibes to it. And also, as far as I'm aware, yeah, speaking of the open world segment, I also did manage to able to discover of how to able to actually access to the secret Bikini Bottom section from SpongeBob SquarePants. And suffice to say though, it's only for a small area, which as far as I'm aware, it's filled to the brim with some little ramps, and that's about it basically. So I don't think it's possible we can able to actually explore into the rest of the forms of the Bikini Bottom. Like for instance though, we can't able to actually explore around into the Krusty Krab, or you know, the Chum Bucket for Plankton, and in addition to that though, etc, etc. Well, speaking of which though, is about the fact I've already established that before, since in yesterday, that the next SpongeBob movie is going to be on its way, enjoying at some point in this year's Christmas this time around, as opposed to the forms of how it does it since in the, well, let's just say that on the first film that did originally came out in 2004, that it did came out in during films in November, and during the second film did came out in 2015, sometime in spring, and usually for the third film did came out in during the summer season, but that was during around that time we stuck in the films of the actual pandemic, so at least in some countries anyway. And on top of all that stuff though, is about the fact that the fourth film is this time around though is now going to be going back into the winter release, except this time it's going to be on December. So yeah, that's actually pretty something, I suppose. So anyway, in addition to some other stuff I would like to point things out, and that's what it appears to be for the fact that yes, only 6 more days to go until Donkey Kong Bonanza for the Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be getting closer to its release by now. So because of that though, and on top of that, I believe we've only got about 13 more days to go until Super Mario Party Jamboree Nintendo Switch 2 Edition plus Jamboree TV is going to be on its way too. So logically though, is about the fact that we can able to actually try to well, play some more games for Nintendo Switch 2 and what have you, because, well, straight to the point though is about the fact it's been about a whole month since we actually last purchased something in regards to the forms of Nintendo Switch 2 games specifically. Well, generally speaking though, because like I said before, that we've already got ourselves the forms of the Express microSD card right now, so that way it'll actually gives us some more storage capacity if we manage to able to get ourselves some even more Nintendo Switch 2 games later down the road, specifically in terms of the forms of third-party supportive games, as long as about the fact it's not going to be the godforsaken game key card functionality, because if it does though, I'm essentially going to have to give up on the forms of that particular format already. Well, because then again though, we've already got one of those games in particular for the game key cards, and that's of course Sonic X Shadow Generations, but I don't really know if I was going to give myself Sonic Racing Cross Worlds for Switch 2, if only because of the forms of how in fact it might able to actually say game key card, as opposed to the forms of how it does it for the standalone copy of the game or something, but time will definitely tell though, especially because considering for the fact that we've only got about, you know, 2 months left until Sonic Racing Cross Worlds is going to be releasing for multiple platforms. So, speaking of which though, is about the fact that I was able to change my mind for a little bit. In regards to the forms of trying to pre-order Sonic Racing Cross Worlds in particular, specifically with multiple versions of the game. Like for instance though, I remember back in Journey Forms of around 2019 for some time ago, basically that was about the fact that we first ended up pre-ordering not only the PlayStation 4 version of Team Sonic Racing, but in addition to the Switch 1 version as well, for the time being, although until in the 2021, basically though we finally managed able to get ourselves the Xbox One version during 2021, after got ourselves the forms of the Xbox One S. I'm almost saying to myself Xbox Series X, but usually, relatively speaking, we've already changed our minds back then in regards to the forms of trying to obtain either the Xbox One or the Xbox Series X, but ultimately though we ended up choosing Xbox One S instead, because obviously though it's much more cheaper, and on top of all that stuff though, it does need some bit of room for our video game console cabinets, so... But at least as far as we do know, it's right from the start. So anyway, so yeah, as you can tell, we somehow completed the Red Coin mission, and in addition to the 100 Coin Power Star mission as well. So now, all we need to do now is just try to focusing on the next mission for now. That's of course, we need to find the forms of Pharaoh's Tomb. And as a matter of fact, we need to go all the way to that particular sinkhole down there, specifically the third and final one, and that way we should be able to find a Power Star in the process. So, not too difficult to able to try to find, but if you choose the first or the second sinkhole, you die instantly, so you have to be very careful about that. So... Anyway, so there is technically one more mission left for that world, but of course we need to rescue Warrior first, because that way we can able to actually have the ability to be able to break that particular black brick block and stuff like that. And also keep that in mind though, unlike the forms of how it does it on both Super Mario 64 as well as Super Mario 64 DS, Toads can't give you Power Stars, because otherwise though, because usually relatively speaking back in Super Mario 64 as well as Super Mario 64 DS, 3 of those Toads does give you a Power Star each, so logically though, that way we can able to get ourselves some bit of completion going. So, yeah, I do apologize for my commentary because it's a little bit slippy sometimes because, well, then again, the fly just somehow appears out of nowhere in my room at the moment, and chances are, though, my tongue just keeps on, like, twirling inside it. So, because of that, though, I do apologize for this point, folks. So, but anyway... Oh, and another thing too is about the fact that recently during the Informs event today, that Superman, the new film, just came out today. And the reviews has been up for the sake of the films of critics and fans alike, and so far, they do really enjoy it so far, which I'm very pleased about, especially because considering for the fact that my expectations might be a little bit higher than I was expecting. Although, mind you though, back in the day, that Superman does have some very good films, but some of them not so much. Like, for instance though, with Superman 3 and Superman 4 is the worst example, and in addition to that though, there's also this very bad crossover film which appears to be Superman x Batman. Although interesting concept-wise, but ultimately though, that film just ended up being pretty bad, all things considered. So, but that's just me. So anyways, as you can tell, we now ended up in yet another secret course, except this time, this place is pretty small, and as you can tell, there's only one secret power star on this area, and that's what appears to be involved around the one and only Switch Star itself. So because of that, time to deal with the forms of Luigi's acrobatic moves, and there we go. Pretty self-explanatory right there, especially that the only thing you need to watch out for is of course a lot of ice physics has been going on, and the actual boss battle itself is just nearby, so we can just simply go for it. And that way, we can able to actually get in contact with the forms that familiar boss ever since in Journey forms have been Super Mario 64 DS, including Mario Kart DS as well. So that way appears to be by the forms that particular... Well, still, I will admit it though right away, this boss is kind of tough sometimes, just because of all that unpredictable behavior with the boss itself sometimes. But when you get the down of it though, this boss is not too shabby when you get the hang of it though, so... But anyway, oh, and speaking of which though, in regards to the films in general, that we actually got ourselves a whole bunch of lists of certain stuff is going to be on too, for the sake of the films of Marvel Cinematic Universe, specifically Phase 6. So no matter what though, some stuff include the Fantastic Four First Steps, which as a result, as a matter of fact, we've only got about 2 weeks left until that film decides to release. And in addition to that, there's also Eyes of Wakanda, I think is what it says anyway. Wonder Man, interestingly enough. Daredevil Born Again Season 2. And in addition to Punisher Special and Spider-Man Brand New Day, and also Vision, and of course Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars. So because of that though, making a total of 9 films have been listed so far in terms of the films of Phase 6. And suffice to say that some people seem to say that Phase 6 will be the last of those phases, or the final phase, in terms of the films of Marvel Cinematic Universe when it comes to series of films, or TV series for that matter. So either way though, we shall wait and see what happens if we somehow manage to fully begin the films of Phase 6, but I still haven't watched the films of Thunderbolts yet. But I'm still expecting about the fact that Thunderbolts will definitely going to be coming during at some point for the sake of the films of Disney Plus, and during the films of either on August or September for my prediction. So anyway, so as you can see, we now ended up in yet another new world right there. And I'll explain more details about that in a second, because there's also another thing else I'd like to explain to you all for something, is that there's actually an English language version of Neo Zero 2 will be releasing in the US theaters and during at some point on the 22nd of August from A24, at least as far as we do notice. So, because usually if you remember, that film is so far as the highest grossing films of 2025 so far. So generally speaking, I was about the fact it is nice to be able to have the English translated version of that particular film coming out, and during the films have been around next month in America. So yeah, that's actually pretty interesting to say the least. So, and speaking of films in general though, I also did manage to able to heard about something, that there's going to be yet another sequel of a film is going to be coming at some point in the future. Specifically, the Garfield movie, the animated series, when it comes to the films of the animated films in general. Because remember back in last year that we've already got the Garfield movie from last year, and now it seems to be more specifically than that, basically though, Garfield 2, the animated film, is going to be in the works. So because of that though, and once again, much like the films of how it does it on, well, let's just say, potentially the new Mario movie, that Chris Pratt is once again going to be voicing Garfield again. So, yeah, I got nothing else to add. So, anywho though, so yeah, let's talk about the films of this world that we are currently onto right now. This world is actually called Shipyard Swamp, because as you can definitely tell, that we once again trying to able to do a lot of emphasis on swimming. And as a matter of fact, on the first mission right here, as you can see, that we're about to be meeting again with the forms of Silver Stars, except we have to force able to ride on Dory for a while, so that way we can able to actually try to obtain not 1, but 5 Silver Stars. And as be expected, the Power Star will appear after we somehow obtain every single Silver Stars, basically. So, yeah, we pretty much used to it by now. And in fact, then no matter what though, I really don't know how do I explain about this personally though. Well, mind you though, still it has been about a couple of hours since I actually have last played this game for sure, on a ROM hack anyway. So either way, that pretty much does it for this mission. So, yeah, not too shabby right there. But anyway, and there's also reassuring about this too, is about the fact that we get ourselves the forms of some interesting news in regards to the forms of Nintendo so far. First of all, is about the fact that Pokemon Go is going to be celebrating its 9th anniversary since in 2016, which we already know for a fact that despite it does have some mixed reviews back then, but despite all of that, the game is still popular enough as it is. Well, mind you though, I still haven't really got my experience of the forms of Pokemon Go, you see, because I've heard so many horrible feelings about the forms of some accidents happen, and on top of all that stuff though, there's some technical issues depending on what phone you get. But I digress. So, no matter what though, is about the fact I'm not entirely sure what they're trying to bring something new to the table. In regards to the forms are trying to celebrate the 9th anniversary of Pokemon Go, maybe we'll find out more about it during the forms of the upcoming Pokemon Presents, and during at some point on the 22nd of July for some time. And maybe we can able to actually hear more about the forms of, you know, Pokemon Champions as well, for potentially for mobile phones and Nintendo Switch, and maybe possibly the Switch 2 edition about that as well. I mean, we shall wait and see what happens. I mean, mind you though, is about the fact I'm still waiting for, you know what I'm saying, for the forms of the hype about the forms of what's to come, in regards to the forms of some more Nintendo Switch 2 games for 2026, and especially noticeable just trying to bring ourselves into the reveal dates for the sake of the forms of, you know what I'm saying, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, both on Switch 1 as well as Switch 2 versions, in addition to Kirby Air Riders and Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. So, because those are the only 3 Switch 2 games, or Switch 1 game in particular for Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, that I was still really looking forward to enjoying the forms of in the future times. So, but anywho though, and in addition to that though, it's about the fact that speaking of which, when it comes to Nintendo Switch 1, unfortunately though, one of the servers is about to shut down or discontinued for some time. Usually it did say that until specifically the 30th of January in 2026, so that's roughly until 7 months or 6 months in particular. So basically though, Nintendo has announced that on its official website, and that's what appears to be for the fact that they will end the extremely handy Nintendo Switch Online voucher program for some time in early during forms of it next year in 2026. So the offer, which give Nintendo Switch Online members the ability to purchase 2 Nintendo Switch software vouchers to redeem against first-party games and some third-party games, will now end on the 30th of January in 2026. So, and Nintendo had previously stated that Nintendo Switch 2 games are not included in that particular promotion. So, and it did say on the actual article right there, and they did state this, as of 11:59 p.m. specific time, January 30th of 2026, it will no longer be possible to purchase Nintendo Switch game vouchers. Any vouchers you purchase on or before that date will work exactly as they currently do. Unused vouchers expires 12 months after the date of purchase. So because of that, yeah, it's gonna be a little bit different in regards to the forms of future years to come, especially because, well, despite the fact I've never actually come across into Nintendo Switch game vouchers for myself, but that's mainly because at that point, I'm still basically trying to able to actually collecting some more physical games for, not only for Nintendo Switch 1, but also with Nintendo Switch 2 as well. So just in case about the fact that I can able to exponentially trying to able to actually see some amazing artwork for the actual box art itself as well. So because of that, yeah, I'm still a little bit biased, I guess. So logically though, that yeah, Nintendo is ending the Switch Online voucher program for the Switch software. So because of that, I'm not entirely sure if it's possible that will be affected for the sake of the forms of if you're trying to able to get yourselves the well, let's just say the digital version of the 2 upcoming games for Switch 1. That's what appears to be Rhythm Paradise Grove, and in addition to Tomodachi Life Living the Dream, because as far as I'm aware, those 2 games in particular is still going to be scheduled for 2026 release for some time, but we still have no idea when those games are going to be releasing during that time, but we shall wait and see. So because of that, and I'm also expecting to able to be still waiting for if we'll try to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Super Mario Bros., which I know I keep saying this because mainly because you know, the 40th anniversary for Mario is going to be huge, which I'm really hoping that'll be the case, because, well, usually relatively speaking though, it's about the fact I would say, if that ever happens, that will technically marks the 5th time about the fact that Nintendo did somehow manage to able to celebrate the Super Mario Bros. Anniversary since in the, well, let's say back in 2005, they did somehow manage to able to celebrate the 20th anniversary back in 2005, and during the informs have been around 15 years ago. During in 2010, they somehow celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Super Mario Bros. Franchise, and then in 10 years ago, they've already celebrated the 30th anniversary of the Super Mario Bros. Franchise, and obviously in 5 years ago, obviously though, they've already celebrated the 35th anniversary. So let's just see what really happens, and during at some points that, like I said before, we have to wait until specifically for around 2 months from now. Well, it might not bother me if we're able to try to wait for a while, because whilst the forms of Donkey Kong Bonanza for Nintendo Switch 2 is going to be on its way, hopefully though I'll play that game more often, and so what if I wait until when, you know, if Nintendo decides they're able to bring us into a bunch of surprises for the sake of the forms of, you know, trying to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the Super Mario Bros. Franchise, and exponentially for next year as well, for the sake of the 40th anniversary of The Legend of Zelda. So, yeah, my expectations will be, well, a little bit something, I suppose. So, again, I do apologize if my commentary is a little bit slightly iffy sometimes. I mean, let's face it though, there's nothing else I can really say in terms of the forms of what's been happening during the forms of my specific parts and stuff like that. I mean, let's face it though, it's about the fact that at that point of view, that obviously though is about the fact that I believe we've almost at the halfway point already, in terms of July already. I mean, time itself has gone pretty flies by, you know, especially considering for the fact that, you know, after playing through a lot of games on our spare own time, and in addition to trying to do some Let's Plays, editing stuff especially, that, man, the time itself just kills it. So either way, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves at this point right now, because either way, as you can tell, I'm basically trying to able to actually go ahead and do the usual 100 coin Power Star mission, and in addition to the red coin Power Star mission as well. So just to ensure for the fact that, well, at that point that we are basically almost done in terms of the forms of, you know, trying to get every single Power Stars related to the forms of the 100 coin Power Stars for that point. So anyway, so let's just go ahead and oh gee, there's a blue coin switch there, but let's go ahead and taking care of that big Goomba right there, as we already did. So I'm really expecting about the fact that we'll get ourselves some even more, or get enough coins to able to actually obtain that Power Star. Oh jeez, where are they? Oh, they're over there. Huh, good thing I spotted that with that particular draw distance as far as I'm aware. Oh yeah, and speaking of the forms of draw distance, as far as I do realize, that usually on the Switch 1 version of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 Plus 4, for Switch 1 version, apparently the draw distance is not exactly the greatest in terms of the forms of the Switch 1 version of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 Plus 4, because there are a couple of times though that the pop-ups will attempt to occur, just like the forms of how it does it for the majority of Sonic Frontiers. It doesn't really matter what platforms you're able to play it on, obviously. I mean, truth be told though, is about the fact it has been about almost 2 years ago since I actually have last played Sonic Frontiers, plus it's mainly because at that point that we've already did manage to able to technically already complete 2 versions of the game specifically on PS4 for the likes of the Let's Play, and the Switch version for our spare own time. Well, apart from the fact that we still haven't exactly unlocked every single hint in Journey forms have been the Final Horizons DLC, plus it's mainly because it wasn't until when the patch update does manage to come in. Journey forms have been later on in 2023, and obviously though they did manage to fix a lot of issues for the sake of the forms of the Final Horizons DLC update, so... And speaking of which though, I was expecting about the fact that if the patch updates will come into play, for the sake of the forms of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 Plus 4 as a remake anyway. So generally speaking, I was about the fact that they'll try to fix a lot of issues, such as for instance, for I've heard that on the Switch 2 version, if you go into like, let's just say, San Francisco level, as far as I'm aware of, the game always attempts to crash randomly, so as a result though, it just kicks you out of the game immediately. Well, I don't know what's causing it exactly, but regardless of anything else though, hopefully there's going to be some, you know, patch updates for that particular game coming up. So yeah, you can get the idea for this point. So either way. Also, I will admit though right away, trying to go for that 100 coin Power Star mission in this stage can take a very long time. At times, but that's just mainly because no matter what though, I was gonna try to deal with the forms of certain enemies and stuff like that, but for the most part though, you'll be spending most of our time trying to do a lot of swimming involved when it comes to trying to finding ourselves some even more stuff in particular. So either way though, because chances are though, yeah, it reminds me of so much of trying to able to actually get the 100 coin Power Star mission for the likes of not only in Jolly Roger Bay, but in addition to Dire Docks as well. I think Dire Docks might be a little bit tedious sometimes, but that's mainly because you have to go for a long stretch in terms of trying to swimming all the way up to where the blue coin switch was. So, but there we go. At the very least, we did somehow accomplish that. So now all we need to do now is just try to find the last red coin, and then once we've gone through all that, then we can just simply try to leave this place for a while until we can able to try to eventually try to unlock Wario, because after all, we've already got the key after defeating that particular boss familiar. So yeah, the actual progress has gone pretty smoothly as far as everything else goes, despite we did die on the rare occasions at one point just because of hesitation. But either way, chances are though, it tends to happen sometimes, you know. Alright, there we go. So we found the final red coin right there. So now we need to get ourselves the Power Star, and we'll leave it to that. So, although I do need to unlock Wario first before I end off the video, so, because fundamentally speaking though, until tomorrow, because like I said before, and I'll say this again, that, I'm afraid to tell you with, the more parts of, WarioWare DIY Showcase is going to be delayed during at some point until next weekend, if Jewel will be making herself a little bit better, until she finally comes back into it, after that, for the, you know, the recovery of the cold that she's having. So, anyway. So now we need to be able to go back down again. Oh jeez, that was close. Because I almost fell into the lava, you see. Because if you dare go into the lava, then you die. So, yeah, we don't want to let that happen, you know. So anyways, let's go ahead and make our way to the 3 sets of locked doors again. And fundamentally speaking, though, we can able to, you know, try to unlock Wario, and that way we can now able to actually conclude some worlds potentially. Like for instance, though, we can now able to actually make things possible to able to actually finally complete the first world and the second worlds respectively. Because as far as I'm aware, Wario is going to be the powerhouse basically. So either way. And there's Wario right there with this very, very peculiar stretchy model right there at the end. Well, regardless of such though, and everything else is pretty much accounted for the sake of the forms of trying to unlock, you know what I'm saying, every playable characters in this ROM hack. So, although I would have liked able to actually go for one of those missions for Wario, but I'm afraid to tell you for this point guys, we are out of time for this point. So with that being said folks, it's that suffice to say, we should probably end things off this point right here. So join me next time for some more Let's Play of another Super Mario 3D, a ROM hack of Super Mario 64 DS. Is that we're about to be collecting some more Power Stars, all thanks to Wario, and trying to able to finish up not only World 1, but as well as World 2 as well as Wario. So I'll see you guys until tomorrow. Later fellas.